Welcome to ENside Politics, our weekly podcast on, let's say, most of the things you need to know about San Antonio politics. I'm Greg Jefferson, Metro Editor of the San Antonio Express News. I'm joined today by Opinion Page Editor Josh Brodesky. Josh, welcome.
It's good to be here.
Hey, let's talk about the mayor's race, and let's start with the fact that it doesn't seem to be generating a ton of excitement. We're seeing kind of sluggish early voting numbers. What do you think's behind that?
Is there a mayoral race right now?
Right. I mean, there are 27. Think about it this way: like if every mayoral candidate and all of their friends and family got out and voted, I mean, that would really drive up the early voting numbers from where they are now.
It's I think there are a couple of factors, and one is Fiesta. It's just I think that's a huge obstacle to voting, to be honest. And then the other one is just the 27 candidates that I don't think there's like a gravitational center to this race yet. And so there's, it's so...
That's right. It feels mushy.
Yeah.
Right? Like you don't know what is this race about and who are the major candidates.
Right.
It's really hard to tell.
Who are the personalities? What are the priorities? It doesn't, I don't know if it really feels real to a lot of people that one of these 27 people will be mayor. And so I imagine that, in such a large field, it's hard to even kind of generate like a personal connection to a candidate,
right.
or so I've never seen a race with 27 candidates in it, and like everyone else, I have no sense of how this first round of voting will play out. Yeah,
and this is the first truly open mayor's seat since 2009, something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, so this will definitely be the first new mayor since Nuremberg was first elected.
Yes,
Ron Nuremberg back in 2017.
Yeah, and that was a compelling race, right? That was we had an incumbent. Ron had been kind of nipping at Ivy's heels. For much of his term, term, he was that like annoying thorn in her side, right? And then he gets elected, and we saw Greg Brockhouse kind of like take on the Ron role to him, right, and push Ron to the
brink. Yeah, I mean he almost lost his seat.
Right,
got pushed into a runoff, and it was pretty close.
It was very close, and so now we're in this place though where, Ron's terming out, and there's been no foil on council really. And there's no one candidate that kind of owns the space. So it's just a very diffuse selection,
Yeah, I mean, you've got nearly half of city council running for mayor. So they're all kind of tripping over one another in some sense.
Yeah.
Now, before we kind of get into the nitty gritty, and I do want to ask you about the editorial board's endorsements, just in your own opinion, like what should the next mayor's agenda be? Like, what do you think the big issues are going to be?
Well, I think
should be.
I think the big issue that whoever's elected, they're going to have to navigate is whatever is going to happen with the Spurs arena, right? And I view that obviously that's part of the broader Project Marvel, but there's obviously there's the question, the very real question of whether or not the Spurs were to move, and with or without the arena. Right. Now, some people don't take that question super seriously. Some take it very seriously, but the next mayor is going to have to navigate that one, right? And so I think that'll be a huge issue. And then, of course, we'll have the familiar themes around affordable housing and workforce development, what to do with the struggling Ready to Work program, right? Obviously, it's been voter approved, and that money is stockpiled. So how are you going to revamp it or change it in a way that meets voters' intentions, maybe improves it? But I think that arena question will be huge. Yeah. It'd just be enormous on that first term.
Yeah. No, I do agree. And as far as Ready to Work, I mean, I think a year ago there was maybe more talk about just scrapping it. It was kind of, it was easy to talk about a year ago. Yeah, it's not working as advertised. Let's get rid of it. I think reality is set in, and I think it's about the next mayor, ushering in changes, kind of fine tuning. Nobody's really talking about scrapping it at this point.
Yeah, very few people are. Obviously, it'd have to go back to voters, and then you'd have to you'd just dedicate that money to the general fund or something like that.
Right.
Which is that superior, like just kind of this slush fund to the general fund? I think that I think everyone can agree that there's very real workforce needs in the community, and the money's not spent unless it's used, right? So the opportunity is there for the next mayor to streamline it or improve it or grow the program. Right. I think, despite all its struggles, one of the talking points that Ron uses fairly well, I think, is that in the end, the money's not spent until someone goes through the program for the most part, right? Besides the administrative costs. And so whether you're talking about a 10-year horizon or whatever, it's still there, right? And someone moving to a better job is a net win. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that program with the next mayor. I think, affordable housing will be a big issue if you look at Project Marvel broadly and just the heated discussion around affordable housing with the minor league baseball stadium, right? So that's going to be out there too. But yes, the Spurs arena to me is front and center.
It is, and it brings a lot of conflicts into play. Not the least of which is giving public money to private interests, particularly sports teams. It's I think it's been pretty well documented by academics that stadiums aren't great for local economies. I mean, it's not a drain, but it's not a bonanza either. Surprisingly, it does not seem to have been much of an issue in this mayor's race. Why do you think that is? Or maybe you disagree.
I think the details, the public conversation around the Spurs arena has been too vague. And and obviously I don't even know where we're at on the MOU process at this point. But it's really like what are the funding sources? How much is it going to cost? All that, we've been kind of talking around this for 12 months or 18 months. So I think that's a real headache. I think you're right that there's no shortage of academic studies that show that public funding on arenas it's not the best return on investment. And I think there's a very real dynamic of being a very large low-income city that would be providing some type of public subsidy to an arena that is owned by very wealthy people, or at least the team's owned by very wealthy people. But sports teams, there's an emotional connection there, and I think when I think about the possibility of San Antonio without the Spurs, that's I think that'd be very hard for San Antonio.
The Spurs are the one thing San Antonio is known for nationally.
Right, exactly.
If we're honest with ourselves. It's
internationally.
Yeah. Right.
So it's, so there's this emotional connection. And sometimes just talking to people in the public, I just wonder how seriously the community takes the question of whether or not the Spurs are as committed to San Antonio as maybe people assume, and I'm not saying for all those, Spurs executives watching this, I'm not saying that the Spurs are necessarily leaving. I just think that there's kind of a dangerous assumption in the public.
Oh yeah.
They're here for good. And it's like, no, they're a business.
Yeah. And I think the people who think that, they might be thinking about the old ownership structure of the Spurs. But I mean, the Spurs recapitalized their team, the franchise, 4 years ago. They dealt out, probably about a dozen local owners, and they were replaced in large part by, a lot of tech money. Michael Dell. He's now an investor. Joe Gebbia, co-founder of Airbnb. He's an investor. Sixth Street Partners, a private equity firm based in San Francisco. They're a sizable owner. So it's different money and a different mindset. So yeah, it is something to be concerned about. I think.
It would be. I think it'd be a real blow to the community if that were to happen. So when you look at the arena discussion, then is the arena a tool to sort of answer that question?
Right.
And I think who wants to be the mayor that when the Spurs leave?
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't want to be that person. Yeah. Right? To have that on your record. So that to me is, while it hasn't maybe gotten a ton of traction, that is a huge question, a huge challenge that the next mayor is going to have to navigate.
Now, you almost certainly have met with the next mayor. You vetted how many mayoral candidates did the editorial board talk to?
We met individually with 8 of the candidates. Okay. So the general thinking there was you either had to have served on city council or were currently serving on city council, or as an outsider, you had to meet a certain fundraising and name identification level. So that led us to the incumbents as well as the three outsiders, Gina Ortiz-Jones, Beto Altamirano, and Rolando Pablos. Right. So, and of course, Clayton Perry having served. Yeah.
Having served, yeah. Okay. Before, no, I know.
He met the criteria.
He met,
I mean, I know. It was interesting to meet with him and talk with him,
you know? He's got a constituency.
He has a big constituency.
He's got just a bad history.
It's a bad history. I agree.
He's got a constituency. We're just not to be obtuse. You probably remember something about a drunken hit and run accident in November 2022. That's what we're referring to. He pleaded guilty. I believe it was to obstruction of a highway. He has paid his penalty. And he's running for mayor now. Now, before we move on from Project Marvel, we'll just put that to rest because we could talk about it all day. Did any of these candidates say anything interesting? Anything that rose above the rest about either a Spurs arena or this kind of broader plan for sports and entertainment industry?
Well, it's interesting to kind of, I don't know if anybody said anything crazy in terms of like interesting, like, wow, that was like really unexpected. But
did not see that coming. But we should pay for the whole thing.
Right. Nobody said it. But I thought it was interesting. Rolando, who's, he's running as a conservative, he said that he was comfortable with up to 50% of public funding on the arena. That was definitely the highest. Gina Ortiz-Jones, she was sort of vague. She had said that, it would depend on the structure of the deal. I would have liked to have seen a better sense of of the public funding. Adriana was 10%. So was John Courage. So they were kind of all. Clayton Perry's a flat no public dollars for an arena. I don't know if those answers were necessarily unexpected. I think what was sort of interesting was some of the candidates really wanted to like make they would say no general fund dollars, but they were comfortable with special taxing districts or the county's venue tax or the recent legislation that Jose Menendez had passed that would allow for arena funding. But I kind of viewed that as like a straw man because nobody has ever talked about general funding. They say we're not going to compromise public safety or streets. And it's well, no one's talking about that. Yeah. Like that's never been on the table. Nobody's ever said that. So I thought that was kind of interesting, that a lot of the candidates kind of tried to frame it that way. But I think there's some understanding that, with the exception of Clayton, who was just the only I guess Melissa was a no, also a flat out no. But I think there's some understanding that, whatever the amount is in terms of public dollars, there is some benefit in having, like whether it's 10% or in Rolando's case up to 50%, you have then these public entities have some seat at the table in terms of the development of the arena, control of the arena. There is some benefit to having some investment in the arena or the infrastructure around it.
Now take us behind the scenes at the editorial board. Give us some insight into how you arrived at your endorsements, because I think the editorial board selected for its main endorsement Adriana Rocha Garcia, which I don't think was just an absolute certainty. I mean, I think it surprised a lot of kind of politicos.
Yes.
So kind of walk us through what your deliberation.
Yeah. So we had this dartboard and we threw the darts and that was it.
Yeah.
No,
it's a lot. So.
I think, so first off, Adriana did very well in our interview. She knows the issues. She has a compelling personal story. She connects really well with people. She works well with her colleagues. So she stood out in our interview. I agree that probably the recommendation surprised some folks. When we started kind of looking at it, we decided that because we believe in ranked voting, like ranked choice voting, that we would try to do that to some degree in our own endorsement. So we put a value on incumbency of people having experience at City Hall. So, we have 4 people who are currently on City Council who understand not just the policies, whatever disagreements they might have about those policies, they understand all the issues coming at the city. They understand how to get to 6 votes. They understand the dynamics between city staff and the elected, right? That city staff. Sometimes as a lot of people who watch this podcast know, sometimes the elected, they say, let's do this, and city staff says, okay, and it doesn't happen, right? City staff kind of
they slow walk it.
Yeah,
it gets lost.
So often city staff rolls the electeds, right?
And
so we looked at that. And then when it just came down to it, when we looked at the policies, how they fit with our views on the policies, and we looked at kind of ethics, personal behavior, how candidates connect with other people or work with other people, how they might treat constituents or various interest groups. And then, we settled on Adriana. And she also has like a really interesting personal story, right? With her, how her family was affected by COVID. I think you could say that she might have been, other than Mayor Ron Nirenberg from the city side, the second most visible elected official during the pandemic. I think when you look at Ready to Work, her constituents in D4 have benefited from that program. I think she has some interesting ideas about how to make that program work on a broader level, particularly for Latinas. She was a single mom. She cares for her parents who are older and have some health issues. And so we felt like maybe she's had a lived experience that a lot of San Antonians could connect with. She was cautious on public funding for the arena at 10%. So there were a lot of reasons to endorse her, and to the degree then maybe that created a new layer of conversation around the mayoral race. Yeah, and that's
she favors another pretty big, probably bigger affordable housing.
That would be her priority.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really interesting, right? Especially given the discussion around the baseball stadium and the loss of affordable housing in the center city and all the pressures around gentrification. It's just so she has a vision. She works well with her colleagues. There are no side issues. There's no, there are no distractions. Right. So we were very comfortable with it.
Yeah. Now, Manny Polias, District 8 councilman, was your number 2. Why?
He was. Yeah. Manny has a big vision. I think he has a forceful personality.
Combative?
And combative. He can be a little combative, right?
Sometimes crazily combative.
He can be very combative.
Yeah.
So when we talked about Manny, we thought, could we picture Manny on CNN representing the city? And the answer is yes, absolutely. Could we picture Manny delivering on a deal around the arena? Absolutely. Could we picture Manny making an unpopular but necessary decision around city government? Definitely. Could he be combative in a good way with city staff? Totally. But
can he also get into self-destructive arguments with staff or other council members?
Yes, exactly. And so that's where I think that's how he ended up sliding into that second spot. It's that but afterwards that would there be distractions? Could he work well with his council colleagues? I think he could, but I think sometimes he can be a little bruising in terms of how he relates to his colleaes, right? So
I think you could ask Terry Castillo or Jayla McKee Rodriguez,
right?
Like they frequent have over the last 2 years,
right.
Pretty consistent run-in.
So that actually was the difference for us in terms of Adriana and Manny. That was the difference, was how did, we've only seen her work well with her colleagues. And so that's what set them apart. But again, in general, we put a premium on having city council experience, right? And so that's how you ended up with our top 3, being Adriana to Manny to John Courage.
With John Courage, did it give you any pause that in November he pulled out of the race, saying, he said something very vague about his health. That was the reason, and then jumping back in.
Yes, it did give us pause. We should also note that during that period, he endorsed Adriana.
That's right.
So it made it very.
She was very gracious about it. By the way. I mean, again, I don't think I would have been anywhere near as nice about it as she was.
Exactly. And so again, credit to her for being gracious about it.
Yeah.
And when you think about how people work with each other, right? That's really important. But given the fact that John had not just endorsed Adriana, but like gushed over her, how smart she is, how talented she is, how she studies the issues. We couldn't imagine given all that praise, how could we say, well, this guy, right? Which isn't to say that he's been, obviously, I think everyone would say that John's been an outstanding city council representative. He like he's engaged with the community. He serves his constituents. Like if there's a problem, I feel like everyone knows that if his office is contacted, they're going to do their best to resolve it. If you look at the clearing of medical debt, like I was really amazed that he could use some basically leftover district funds and wipe out.
Big impact,
Have big impact. And so there's a lot going for him, I think, as a mayoral candidate. But yeah, that was kind of the difference maker there, right? And so that's how he slid into that third slot.
And then you had kind of a tie for fourth, Gina Ortiz-Jones, two very different picks politically. So Rolando Pablos, former Texas Secretary of State, active in Republican politics. Then Gina Ortiz-Jones, she was Undersecretary of the Air Force under Biden. Democrat, straight up Democrat. She was the Democratic nominee in 2 congressional races. Did lose both of them. So kind of walk me through how you were writing those two.
So to really pull back the curtain on this, obviously very different candidates, very different takes on issues. Probably would have very different relationships with the state, at least at the governor's office, right? The way we looked at it was this: we were going to put a premium on council experience. So of the 3 main outsiders, Gina and Rolando impressed us the most in terms of their command of the issues and their professional experience. Like, you know, if you took the partisan nature of their backgrounds, if you took that out, if you look at what they have done in their careers, it's impressive, right? So then how we felt was we would just put them in as a tie at this moment, because should they both make the runoff, we would want more time to kind of evaluate where that recommendation would go, that we'd want to probably meet with them again to talk about city issues, to kind of really study them. And so, I mean, putting them in a tie at that point, you know, like I guess we sort of evaded the rank choice on that one, but we just wanted more time should they both make it. And then we figured if only one of them were to make it, well, then they're tiered in, right? And so, because what we really needed to do on this, because we decided to do ranked choice voting ourselves, is we need to rank in a way that however this 27 candidate race goes, that whoever's in the runoff, we could look at our rankings. Like I said to the team, I said, we can't say, oh, well, you know, we put this candidate 5th and we put this candidate 3rd. Let's switch them now. Like we can't do that, right? So that's how they end up being as a tie. It was just the general thought that should they both make the runoff, even though they're very different candidates, we would want more time to really study them. Should it be a head-to-head and much more of a partisan race at that point, right?
Yeah. Now, you know, obviously the next mayor, as Ron Nirenberg has discovered just in the last couple of months, the job is going to be different under President Trump. Just given the uncertainty of federal funding, given the crackdown on the border, which has, you know, it'll have ripple effects across our economy. Is that something you took into consideration when you were talking with each candidate? Like, how would they position the city in, you know, what would be their counterpose to the Trump administration or Greg Abbott in Austin? Yeah,
I think there was some consideration on that, but we're really more, and I'll explore that in a second here, but we were really more focused on command of city issues and ability to get to 6 votes, right? Like kind of the functioning of local government, right? So I kind of think of that as 3 buckets. Like, can you get to 6 votes? Do you understand these kind of sometimes overly complicated community concerns, right? I don't mean overly complicated in a negative sense, just that when you get down to the nitty gritty, like there are a lot of layers to unpack, right? And then, you know, how do you work with city staff in terms of not only working with city staff to effectuate an outcome, but also just making sure that city staff isn't, you know, follows through on the policy, which has been an issue, right? But in terms of federal and state government, that came up a little bit in a secondary sense, just in terms of, you know, like we asked in our survey, we basically had a question of kind of gauging, like, should the city be like proactively working with the Trump administration, right, on immigration issues? I can't remember how we worded it, but we tried to word it in a way that you know, and most of the candidates other than Clayton Perry were like, no, right? But so I think it gets into kind of that Mark White, Manny Pelaez debate, right? Like if, do you pick your fights? Are there funding repercussions if you do? I think in terms of that dynamic, what we're really looking for is just temperament, and if those fights are going to be picked, are they made from a solid, principled moral ground, right? Yeah. So it's all out of their hands, though, really, right? Yeah. Like it really,
that's right.
You're
talking about something super reactive.
Yeah, like the federal government, like the Trump administration is going to just do what it does, yeah. and
nobody's going to say, wait, before you sign that executive order,
right.
check with the San Antonio.
Exactly.
You're right. That's not
yeah, exactly. So, I think at the state level, look, whatever friction has existed between the state and San Antonio, I mean, at the end of the day, it's in the governor's interest for San Antonio to thrive. So the cybersecurity investment here reflects that, right? So I think that, those are considerations, but I think they come after the local considerations of basically the functioning of government and responsiveness to community concerns.
Right? Okay, last question. Yeah. And I'm going to make it as unfair as humanly possible. You ready?
Yes.
Okay, so there's almost certainly going to be a runoff, right? I mean,
yes.
Unless your endorsement is going to take Adriana Rocha Garcia over the top,
right.
over 50%, it's going to go into a runoff. Who are the two candidates you really want to see face off in a runoff in a way that's good for the city? Like two really distinct points of view, a clash of which is going to be good for all of us. We're a better democracy for having seen this debate. Who are those two candidates?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. Man, I could answer this in okay.
I told you it was unfair.
It's unfair. So I would say that what I'd like, I think it'd be really interesting. I'll answer this in two parts. It'd be interesting to see one of the council incumbents square off against Gina Ortiz-Jones. Mm-hmm. Okay, I think Gina is a force. She's strong and she's super smart and she comes at it as an outsider. And then you'd have one of these city council members who has been in the system, who knows how things work. It'd be interesting. The other one would be the partisan race, right? Where it's Gina and Rolando, and we have a kind of a very openly. It's kind of weird to say this because it's a non-partisan office, but we'd have a very openly partisan discussion.
Yeah, I think it would look familiar to a lot of people, but just not in the context of a city election.
Right.
It would be like a general election.
Right. Now, I think so from an interesting perspective, there'd be a lot of fireworks in that sense, right? I think then the question really becomes is that in the best interest for San Antonio to have a partisan race about what has been a nonpartisan office, right? Because and is that just the reality of? Yeah, I mean,
you could just be another way of coming at that is you're just being a little more honest that these races are they've been covertly partisan anyway. Right. Just take the covers off and just make it straight up partisan.
Yeah. So I think those are. I mean, I give you two answers instead of one, but I mean, as I've thought about this, it's just been, an outsider versus someone established at City Hall, or these two. I know that Beto's out there too, but these two really experienced partisan candidates, giving San Antonio voters a chance to clarify their values or views. It would be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah.
Josh Brodesky, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks a lot for having us. Me. I don't know where that thanks for having me.
No problem. And thanks for joining us. If you haven't voted in the early voting portion of our election, drop by a polling place, vote. Also, if you've not signed up for our ENside Politics newsletter, drop to the show notes, click the link, sign up, and we will see you next week. We'll be talking about election results then. So there you go. Thanks a lot. Bye.